Dwight, it's just really good to see you again. How was your week this week?
I'll race straight ahead except for around the corner. Yeah. And yours?
Well, this week has been a heavy week. There's a lot going on. My life, people's lives around me, friends, really good friends. Kind of since the new year began, and we're already 2 months in, but it's just been heavy, and I felt that, what do we do? I think especially one of the questions that comes to mind is like, one of the questions that I've had from some friends directly is like, I hear God's voice. I've heard him in the past. I feel like I know, I believe, and then it's like going through the thick of it, kind of coming into that. It's like it feels like I can deal with it because of that peace that he's given to me, and then you get a little deeper and a little deeper and a little deeper, and it's like he's like I can't hear God's voice anymore. I've heard it in the past, but I'm not hearing it. I've done all of these things. I've cleaned my life up. I've done these other things, and I'm doing, so there's a lot. It's like, it feels like our lives are going in the right direction, but then it just feels like we're getting suffocated by these things. And then it's like, I can't even hear God's voice anymore. When in the past you have, I know there's been times in my life where it's been like that too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Our friend Kelsey asked a question, and his question was, and I want to go to this secondly, but the first question was, if somebody's not a follower of Jesus, does God hear them when they talk? Does God hear them when they pray? And so if you have a friend of yours and say, yeah, I've been praying to God, and you know that they haven't really been following Jesus, what would you think of that, and what would you tell them?
I really don't know. I would probably listen to hear where they're at first, because sometimes I don't know what I never really feel like I have advice to give, but I want to hear them out because I want to help. Yeah. But I know Jesus has helped my life, and I just want to share that. Yeah.
So first thing is God is God. He's omnipresent, right? And he hears all things, and he knows all things, right? And so in this conversation we're having, God is hearing. And so God hears them, right? And so because God is God hears them. And so that's the first part. We would say God hears everything. Mm-hmm. So when they're praying, when they're asking. The second part, I look at it this way: when somebody is praying to God, they're on a journey. They're on that journey, and sometimes, and God sometimes answers, gives them what they're asking for, what they're requesting. I've seen people that I've prayed over, and they've healed, and then been healed, and then they turn away from God, and so. God is sovereign. He answers according to his way, but he doesn't force them.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something. I don't know. Something came to mind as you're talking about that. Seems simple, but God coming back to Genesis, and like God made man and woman in his image and likeness. He didn't make the Christians or the believers or the followers of him in his image. I think that's a part of that, but humans are made after that. And so I think he still cares about us, even though we don't, if we're not a follower yet, or we're not on that journey yet. Yeah.
And so God so loved the world, It doesn't say that God so loved just a select few. Right. And so God loved the world, but he's seeking to bring them all back into that relationship. He wants to redeem them. He wants to restore them. He wants to reconcile them, bring them back into that relationship. Yeah. And so, part of that journey is they're praying. He may answer that prayer, right. But he hears them. But the first part that really brings us into the relationship is we come and say, God, you know what? Adam sinned, I've sinned.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I've sinned, but Jesus died and took my sin. So
Right.
I'm receiving that gift that he's offering to me, that gift of eternal life and a gift of a relationship with you. I become your child.
Yeah.
And God is always at work trying to bring people into that, and whether they respond to that or not.
Right.
And so I think that, answering that question is that, does God hear? Yes, God hears. Does he always answer it in the way that they're asking? No, but sometimes he does. So God's a gracious God and a loving God. And so he sometimes answers that. But he's seeking to bring them back into that. He's always after bringing us into redemption and receiving there. Now, going back to what you're going through and what others are going through, Sherry and I have been talking about this as well. That it seems like in the new year, as we've entered into it, we've had so many blessings, so many things that are going on, and God is working powerfully. And then all of a sudden you get thrown all of these curveballs, all the things that are happening, and so where is God in the midst of that? And you're talking about your friends, and I'm going to turn this back to you for a second, but the guys can say, you know what, I'm doing all of the right things now, and it seems though things are getting worse. So how would you answer that?
That's been my question, because I know, I think there's certain things in life where it's easy to see through it, to see past it, see the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. I know, for example, question.
Yeah. Well, it might not necessarily be an answer that you think.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Like
you're exactly.
God might not answer you that way that you're asking the question. God will, you're like, man, I just wish I had more work opportunities. He's going to give you opportunities to work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it might not be like, here's a bunch of work opportunities. It might be like, here's a bunch of opportunities to go and work. Or, man, like, I just have no patience. Well, here's a bunch of...
Ways to get patient. Yeah. Well,
tribulation works patience.
Well, you're exactly right. Well, and that's I understand that. I think we can all understand that at times, but I think sometimes it's hard to even see through that. I'm not saying that we can't, because I've been through a few. This is just a simple example. My truck got stolen last spring. For whatever reason, I had zero anxiousness about it, whatever. I was just...
If I owned a Chevy, I wouldn't be anxious.
Yeah, exactly. If I had a Ford, holy moly, man, I would have been sweating, But no, like I was... This is the first time... I never had a vehicle stolen. I've had the truck for years. It's my second office. But... For whatever reason, I didn't experience any anxiousness through that. I had other people around me that were like livid, ticked right off. But I didn't experience that, and I was like, this is weird, because I've never went through something quite like this before. And I'm like, you know what? It's in God's hands. I don't know what brought me to that, because normally I would have been upset, worried about it, trying to figure it out on my own. Just, I just let it go. There's other times where it's like, it could be something even smaller than that, in a sense, in my mind, maybe bigger in other people's minds. But like, it could be just something simple in work or in something in my personal life. It's like, man, that really bothers me, but it could be small in insignificance to something else.
Yeah. So, Max, there's an expression that says that faith that cannot be tested cannot be trusted.
Yes.
And so you're talking about your friends, and they're going through, they're doing well. And so when you come to faith, Satan hates that. When you're growing in faith, Satan hates that.
Yeah.
When as you're moving along and you're getting rid of the garbage, as you're talking about cleaning your life up, or seeing your life being cleaned up, Satan hates that.
Yeah.
And so now he comes along. And so there's that testing in our lives where where God allows. And remember, we talked about this a little bit ago about the book of Job. And that book, I've gone to that so many times when I'm in the midst of a trouble, in the midst of a trial, midst of facing a war in my life. And I go to it. And Job, he's totally innocent of what's happening. Yeah. And so there's this scene where Satan comes into heaven. He comes before God. He comes in with the sons of God, with the angels of God. Yeah. And God says, where you been? And I just been trucking around the earth, looking here and there, everything. And he said, well, have you considered my servant Job? And he said that he loves me. He hates evil. Yeah. And Satan says, yeah, but if you let me test him, I'll show you that he doesn't really love you. Yeah. If you let me start taking away, because you've blessed him, you put a hedge about him.
Yeah, he loves you because you've given him all these things.
Yeah, he loves you because you're good to him. Yeah. If you don't seem like you're good to him, and so Satan says, so God says to Satan, I'll take that challenge. Mm-hmm. And we don't know what's happening in the heavenlies, right? And so two things are going to happen in that. Number one, it's going to display. It's going to display our faith and our trust. The second thing is it's going to refine us in this, and it's going to build our trust in God as we go through this. And and Job says, though he slay me, yet I will trust him. Yeah. And so Job loses. You go through that first group of things that he loses. He loses animals, he loses servants, and he loses his children.
Mm-hmm. And it all happens. Bang, 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 bang.
Bang, bang, bang.
And it's hard and fast.
But thank you for pointing that out, Max, because Satan loves to keep us reeling. He seldom gives us just the one thing. It's generally one thing after another. And while you're still reeling from the first thing, he throws another thing at you and another thing at you. Because he knows that we start to break down after all of these things. And so in that, we look at Job when he comes and finally he says, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And then we go, okay, that's over. No, it isn't. So they go back, Satan comes back to heaven again, and he says to God, God says to him, where you been? And you're just trucking around the earth. And he says, yeah. He said, what about Job?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, but he said, if you let me touch his body, he'll curse you to your face. And God said, I'll take that challenge. And we never know where God is saying, I'll take that challenge concerning us, because we don't see the heavenly. Although Job didn't have a book to read and know what was coming, we can look at it and say, okay, we know what happened to Job here. Yeah. And so we know that there can be this testing, right?
Yeah.
And
I know, something I think about, and I know even for myself in the midst of it, it doesn't feel like this, but when God says, I'll take that challenge, that's a pretty I would say honorable thing, because he's saying, I trust him to trust me.
Yeah.
He's betting on us, basically. For us in that moment, I know it's like, what the heck, you've just abandoned me. But it's also, I don't know.
Yeah, so we hear, Job hears the silence of God, and that's what your friends are hearing.
Yeah,
right?
Well, and I've heard it too.
Yeah, and so we do that, and we can say, and we'll talk in another thing, how do I hear God? I'd like to do something on that in the future. Yeah. How does God speak to us? How do I know that this is God speaking? And we'll talk about that. But that silence of God speaks volumes to us when we're praying, when we're asking, when we're seeking, and all we hear is silence. Mm-hmm. That speaks volumes to us, and we say, okay, God has forsaken me.
Yeah.
Right? God has forsaken me, and in the midst of this, and Satan is telling us, see, God doesn't really love you. God doesn't really care for you, or he would speak to you, or he would answer you, or he would take this away. Yeah. And so then Satan comes, and so God says, you can touch his body, but you can't take his life.
Yep.
So the next thing that he ends up with is what?
Sores all over his body.
Yeah, head to foot, sores, but that leads to something else as well. And so he's outside. He's on an ash heap, and he's scraping. He's got broken pottery, scraping these boils that he has, and then what happens?
His wife says,
What does she say?
Curse God and die.
So you know what that literally means? Curse God and commit suicide. And so here's the one that he loves more than anybody else in this world. And she comes out and she goes, oh, wait a minute. And we could be accusative of her.
Yeah.
But she lost everything that he lost. She lost 10 children.
Up until that point.
Up until that point. Right? Everything before they lost together. And she could say, well, if God is punishing us, then he's punishing both of us or one of us, and we don't know who was really in the wrong. Because often when people see you going through troubles, they go, what did you do wrong? Why is God against you? Yeah. Instead of, God is purifying you. God is testing you. God is putting you through the trial. Because the trial, a faith that cannot be tested cannot be trusted. And so when that occurs, she goes, oh, all of this problem is his fault because he has boils and I don't.
Yeah.
And so she comes out and she says, curse God and die. And Job says to her, you speak like one of the foolish people.
Yeah.
Can't God give good and not give evil?
Yeah.
Right? So this limited view of God, that if he's a good God, that everything has to be good that comes from him at that point. Right? And so she asks that. And so Job is in the midst of that. Then his friends come. But so the book of Job really helps us to understand when you're going through that. And I remember reading through that in the middle of the night when I was going through stuff. And God just began to say, you know what? You don't see it yet.
Yeah.
You don't see what I'm doing. You don't see what the outcome of this is. And so God is refining Job in the midst of that. He becomes refined through the refiner's fire. And some of the trials and troubles and tribulations and difficulty that we go through are because he's refining us. And he's getting rid of the dross out of us, all of the stuff that is kind of worthless, and getting us to the place where we just cry out for him.
Yeah, and I think, brings us back to to really recognize our reliance should be on him, but I think it's to bring us to another level of like our faith in him.
Yeah,
and when you test a bridge, I'm just thinking of that in a few different. My brain brings different examples in, but like when you're in order to increase strength, for example, working out, you need to put your muscles under stress. They don't really like it at the time. But in order to
pain,
get
no gain.
No pain. There you go. Sum it up. No pain, no gain. But like, it's not all about the gain, but it's to bring us to a new level with him.
Absolutely, and that testing, right? You see, and and we see where we're weak too in the midst of that. Sometimes it shows our strengths, sometimes it shows our weaknesses, and we begin to call out, and God meets us there, and in the midst of that. And so, as your friends are going through that, it's not an attack by God. It's not that God has deserted them, because God said, I will never leave you. Although there are periods of silence when we're in the midst of it, and we're really crying out for God to speak to us right now. And he's saying, no, I'm waiting. And he's saying, do you have faith to believe? Even if. And I had places in my life where I was ready almost to walk away from Christianity. And in the midst of that, God said, will you trust me even if it doesn't turn out the way you think it should? And I stopped right then and I go, yes, God, I'll trust you. So, and that's the truth that, that really needs truth to be told on that, is that as we come to him and a faith that can't be tested, can't be trusted. We can't trust it. But as he tests it, then we see, and then we go, okay, God, even if you don't answer when I want, in the way that I want, I know that you're there. I know you care for me. I know
that you have my best interest at
absolutely. And at some point I'd like to talk about dreams that God gives for your life. the death of those dreams,
Right.
and then the resurrection of those. So
Right. Yeah.
I think we're done.
How do you want to outro that one?
Could've just outroed it, but
Well, hey. So, yeah. I'll just. Thanks for joining on the. What's that? I don't know about that. Thanks for joining us on this conversation. We have when we're going through stuff, I think it's just important to talk. We were chatting with another friend earlier this week, and we were discussing the same topic, and I believe fully what he was telling me. He's like, I think, when we get together, it's just important to pray.
Yeah.
Pray with each other, and recognize that we're not alone in this. I think sometimes it's easy to feel alone, and we're not. So talk to each other and share with one another. So thanks again for joining us, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week. God bless.